Touch by Byu. Ever since he was little, Hinata's been one for physical contact. He's never seen anything weird about it. He just loves the feeling of being close to people. He knows how to rein himself in, of course. He's not as dumb as some people seem to think he is. But he much prefers when he's able to touch someone's arm, knock their knees together, lean against them when they're close enough. Hinata knows not everyone is the same way as he is. He's learned most people like their space, and he's figured Kageyama is that way. Kageyama keeps his distance from people, shoots them a glare whenever they get too into his personal space, and tells Hinata to stop being an idiot when he hangs all over him. Lately, though, things are weird. Hinata doesn't notice it at first, really. It's small things. Natural things, like when they sit together at lunch and Hinata ends up hooking his ankle over Kageyama's, and he doesn't move away. In fact, he seems not to notice it, and goes on eating his lunch like nothing's different. Hinata is elated at first, because that means that Kageyama's comfortable with him enough to not mind if Hinata falls asleep on his lap, or grabs his hand, or presses their cheeks together when he leans over to see something Kageyama's looking at. Kageyama used to shove him away, grumbling about personal space, and how some idiots can't read the atmosphere, but now he barely notices. And then there's the other thing. The thing that makes Hinata start to notice. It's been happening for a while. Maybe. Hinata's not quite sure, but he finally notices one day when they're eating lunch, and he's talking animatedly about something he's seen on TV the other night, waving his arms around like he does, and Kageyama's humoring him. Barely. He seems more interested in eating his lunch and staring absently at Hinata than anything else. And then Hinata takes a deep breath, about to punctuate a sentence with something like, "Kwa!" when Kageyama's reaching over and plucking a stray piece of rice from his cheek. The words die in Hinata's throat, because isn't that kind of weird? The only person who's ever done that was his mom. He knows he can be a messy eater. Kageyama's told him plenty, but usually he's just told that he has something on his face, and to wipe it off, stupid, before someone notices you're like a 5-year-old. What's weirder is when Kageyama pops it into his mouth, unthinkingly, still watching Hinata like he's off somewhere, thinking about something more important than whatever action show Hinata's recounting. He doesn't even notice Hinata staring at him until about 30 seconds later, when he scrunches up his face and frowns. What? Hinata shakes his head and laughs it off by telling Kageyama he was staring into space, and Kageyama tells him maybe if he talked about something interesting for once that wouldn't happen, but Hinata can't stop feeling the brush of Kageyama's long fingers against his cheek, or the way his mouth opened to eat that stupid piece of rice. And that's only the first thing. After that happens, Hinata seems to notice so many more things that he hadn't before, and they happen so frequently that he wonders how long he's been oblivious of them. Kageyama will grab his wrist to point something out, not letting go even when Hinata's looking in the right direction. When he finally lets go, Hinata's wrist feels warm where Kageyama's fingers had been wrapped around it, and he finds himself touching it throughout the day. Sometimes, Kageyama's hands end up on his back, guiding him away from something about to trip him over. Too low to really be considered normal, but it feels nice. And for the rest of the day, Hinata feels it there, like with every other place Kageyama touches him. Once, when he falls down trying to spike a toss, Kageyama's fingers wander over the skin of his leg, down to his ankle, checking to make sure he didn't hurt anything, despite Hinata's red-faced protest that he's fine. Hinata can't focus for the rest of practice after that, and when he gets hit in the face with a stray ball, and Kageyama's fingers find their way to his forehead, Hinata tells himself that this really isn't normal, and there's no way Kageyama used to touch him this much. It's not that he minds, really. It's just weirdly distracting, and he can't figure out why someone like Kageyama of all people would be doing this. He's watched him, just to make sure, and he definitely doesn't do it with anyone else. Although he's a lot less rigid than he used to be. It's only Hinata. Hinata's the only one that receives an awkwardly affectionate hair ruffle when he's being overly excited. The only one who feels Kageyama's fingers on his neck when he's roughly pulling him out of the way of someone walking in their path. It's definitely weird. Weirder still, though, is the fact that Hinata starts thinking about this. These stray, casual moments. Even when Kageyama's not around. He'll be sitting in his room struggling through English homework when he imagines Kageyama sitting next to him, telling him that his writing looks terrible and it's probably all wrong, and putting a hand on his bare knee to lean forward and look over his work. Every time this happens, Hinata feels like he's breaking out into a cold sweat. At first, he thinks maybe it's because he's not used to Kageyama doing this. Or anyone, really. Even his closest friends in middle school hadn't been this touchy with him. And Hinata doesn't think he's this touchy with anyone either. And oddly enough, when Kageyama doesn't touch him where he usually would, Hinata finds himself seeking out the other boy, wanting to make contact just because he feels like it. Hinata wonders if this extends both ways. Would Kageyama realize if he started with this weird, casual touching too? He decides to try it one day, fully expecting Kageyama to jerk his leg away when they're sitting on the bench during practice, and Hinata works up enough courage to put his hand on Kageyama's knee. He sees Kageyama's muscles tense, and he's gonna do it. He's gonna knock Hinata's hand off. But he doesn't. He keeps talking, discussing something with Sugawara, when Hinata watches, fascinated, as his hand remains on Kageyama's knee like it's no big deal. His skin is warm, and Hinata doesn't know what he's expecting, but it's almost surreal, like he's dreaming. After that, Hinata tests it out in more scenarios. It's sort of freeing to be able to touch Kageyama whenever he pleases, to put a hand on his shoulder and leave it there when he stretches his legs to try and see something Kageyama's holding up in front of his face, or to grab Kageyama's face between his hands when he's being more of a jerk than usual. As time goes on, he even forgets he's doing it, really. No matter how much time passes, though, Kageyama's touching never goes back to being unnoticed. Hinata doesn't think Kageyama notices it anymore, as he uses his hands more and more often to guide Hinata into place, to point something out to him, or to wipe a smudge from Hinata's nose when they end up tumbling to the dirt after a stupid fight over something or other. And still, Kageyama doesn't touch anyone else like that. Honestly, Hinata wants to ask him about it, but he has no idea how to go about it. "Hey, why do you touch me so much?" Sounds weird, and like he's opposed to it, which he isn't. It's just this strange feeling in his stomach that he gets that throws him off, and he doesn't know how to say that either. He doesn't know how to explain the heat in his cheeks whenever Kageyama's hand stays on his skin too long, or the way he's been daydreaming about it during class. He doesn't know how to mention the dream he has one night that leaves him sitting up in shock and way too flushed to be normal. He figures if he just leaves it be long enough, it will become natural, like everything else they do together, and he'll forget it was ever a thing he noticed in the first place. In the meantime, he tries to distract himself with other things, instead of the way Kageyama's hands feel on him. And it mostly works. Kind of. A little. And then, one day, it breaks. Hinata doesn't quite remember what brings it on, but suddenly Kageyama's hand is on his cheek, and he's looking at Hinata like he's stupid, as usual, but it's the feeling of his hand right there. So close, and then he's gonna move it away, and Hinata finds his hand flying up, clasping onto Kageyama's and holding it there. They stare at each other. Kageyama's face is in this weird limbo between annoyance and surprise, like his body doesn't know what to do, and Hinata knows he's just staring blankly, but doesn't know what else to do with it. Suddenly, Kageyama's hand is jerking away from him, and his face is red like he's just realized what he's been doing this whole time. He's shoving his hand into his pocket and turning away like nothing had happened, and Hinata is left feeling weirdly cold. He looks down at his own hand, like maybe he can find the answer there, the thing that's made Kageyama suddenly self-aware. But there's nothing, just his own slightly smaller hand. Kageyama's back to talking about something like nothing had happened, but for the rest of the day, his casual touches are strangely absent, and it's more jarring than the actual touching had been. Hinata's gotten so used to it that he feels kind of empty, expecting a hand on his shoulder when he walks too far ahead, but nothing's there. It goes on for a week. A solid week of next to no contact with Kageyama, except where it's immediately called for. Accidental hand touching when they pass a ball to each other, and even then Kageyama keeps it as short as possible, like he wants to avoid touching Hinata at all costs. Hinata knows he probably shouldn't feel hurt, but he does, like he's done something to offend Kageyama, and they're back to where they started. It's not right. There's an unease filling his stomach, and he hates it. A week and 4 days later, Hinata really can't stand it any longer. He corners Kageyama at lunch, and they're alone. "What's your problem?" he finds himself saying, barging ahead without any real plan other than get Kageyama to stop acting weird and go back to acting weird. Kageyama blinks at him like he has no idea what he's talking about. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he confirms. "Unless you mean why I'm not eating my lunch, and then my answer is you're my problem, standing there like an idiot." Hinata huffs. "No, I guess, but that's not what I meant. Ever since a week and 4 days ago, you haven't touched me at all." He watches as Kageyama's face does this weird transition from annoyed to bewildered to indignant embarrassment, color flooding his cheeks. What the fuck are you talking about?" He's sputtering, and Hinata knows that he's got him pinned. "You know what I'm talking about. That's why your face is all weird like that." He puts his hands on his hips, trying to make himself look bigger and more threatening. "Last week you touched my face, and now you won't anymore." "You want me to touch your face?" Kageyama's trying to play it off with a sneer, but Hinata can see he's trapped him. "You're really a dumbass, you know that?" "Shut up!" Hinata puts his foot down. Literally. "What is wrong with you?" Kageyama shoots back with a, "What is wrong with you? You're cornering me and telling me you want me to touch your face?" He's making this way more difficult than it has to be, and Kageyama glares at him for it. "You know what I mean. You're always touching me, and then suddenly you aren't anymore. Are you mad? I don't mind if you do it. It's weirder if you don't, and I don't like it." Kageyama's glare is faltering, and he's flicking his eyes to the side like he wants to know who is responsible for whatever's going on. But it's just him and Hinata. He's not saying anything, so Hinata presses forward until Kageyama's back hits the wall, and their chests are touching, as much as they can with their height difference. Hinata frowns up at Kageyama, narrowing his eyes like maybe it will allow him to see through what's making him be so weird about this. Hinata raises one of his hands, intending to bring it up to touch Kageyama's cheek, when Kageyama jerks his head back so hard it hits the wall, and he's cussing and grabbing the back of it. It would be hilarious, and Hinata's gonna remember to tease him about it later. But right now, there's nothing funny about how Kageyama's acting, when all Hinata wants to do is touch him. "See? You're seriously being weird." Hinata steps back a little, just barely, to give himself an easier time looking up at Kageyama without craning his neck so much. "Touch me." What? Touch me! You hurt me! Hinata stares at Kageyama. It barely registers with him that it's kind of a weird request, but he doesn't care at this moment. He fights down the blush trying to sneak across his cheeks. Touch me and prove you're not acting weird. Kageyama looks like he's trapped, like he wants to shove Hinata away and run. But he doesn't. Touching you would be acting weird, stupid. Is that what you're worried about? You think I'm weirded out by you touching me? You think I just noticed it a week ago or something? Because I didn't. Do it. For a good moment, they stand there, neither of them willing to move. Hinata, with a sinking feeling, almost thinks he's gonna have to give up. And then Kageyama's moving his arm, looking away, and his hand works up to rest on Hinata's cheek. He's steadfastly staring at something off to the corner, and his hand is unsteady. So Hinata does the only thing he can think of to reassure Kageyama that he doesn't care, and once again brings his own hand up to cover the one on his face. This time, Kageyama doesn't jerk it away, and his hand seems to steady itself. So Hinata reaches out to grab the other one, and bring it up to his other cheek. There, he says, weirdly nervous, despite having gotten what he wanted. There are butterflies in his stomach. It wasn't that hard. You're just stupid. Reluctantly, Kageyama's eyes flicker back to Hinata's. He stares for a moment, and then he's squishing Hinata's cheeks between his hands, and there's a tiny grin crossing his face, and Hinata practically beams back at him. As soon as he does, though, Kageyama's face drops again, and he just keeps staring, like he's thinking really hard about something. Hinata's about to ask him what's up, why he's making that scary face when he was doing so well a second ago, when there's a flicker of resolution in Kageyama's eyes, and then he's leaning in, really, really slowly. Hinata feels like time is stopping. He doesn't know what's going on, and if he should move away, or move in, or what. So he freezes, holding Kageyama's hands in place against his cheeks. Their noses touch, and Kageyama keeps looking at him, like he's expecting Hinata to do something, but Hinata doesn't know what to do. They breathe each other's air for a minute longer, before Kageyama's moving forward, just a tiny, tiny bit, tilting his head and pressing his lips against Hinata's. Hinata doesn't know what he's been expecting, but it definitely wasn't that. It only lasts for about 3 seconds, but it feels like 3 hours before Kageyama's moving back, squaring his shoulders and looking down at Hinata. That's why I didn't want to touch you, he says, like that explains everything, and Hinata's mad because it doesn't at all. He says so. If you do something like that, doesn't that mean you want to touch me? He knows his face is redder than it's maybe ever been, so he glares and pretends to be mad. You don't make any sense ever, Kageyama. I'm making perfect sense. You're just the one who's too stupid to notice when someone wants to kiss him and is doing his best not to pull any weird shit that would freak him out, and then you go and do something like this and act like I have to explain it? You're so dumb! Kageyama snaps, trying to move his hands away from Hinata's face, but Hinata locks them there with his own. If you want to kiss me, then you should just do it. I did do it, and you're still as stupid as ever. This really isn't getting anywhere, and Hinata's getting annoyed at being called stupid when he's really trying to understand. So he kicks Kageyama in the shin. Kageyama cringes and bends down, as if he wants to grab the shin that's probably already bruising, and Hinata takes the opportunity to crush his lips against Kageyama's own. And then he's releasing Kageyama's hands, in favor of bringing his own up to the taller boy's face to hold him still, while he does his best to put his feelings into a kiss. He's never kissed anyone before, but he thinks he does a pretty good job, because when he pulls back, Kageyama's mouth is as red as his face, and he's staring at him with a shocked expression. Hinata feels oddly satisfied, like he's just solved all his problems. When Kageyama leans in and kisses him again, he supposes he has, because Kageyama's hands are still on his face, and he feels so much better than he has all week. There's a warmth in his chest, and he can't stop smiling, even though this situation is really, really weird. Maybe. He doesn't care. Afterwards, Kageyama's touching returns, although it lingers even longer than it used to. He doesn't even think Kageyama notices, now that he's not trying to pretend he doesn't want to. He definitely notices sometimes, though, when Hinata's hand moves a little too high up on his leg, and he looks over shocked, to see Hinata grinning like the cat that ate the canary. In return, after practice when they're heading to change, Kageyama grabs his butt, and Hinata yelps, grabbing the attention of everyone around them, while Kageyama looks completely and infuriatingly innocent. What he means is, things are even better than they were before, and if that means he has to tackle Kageyama to the ground in impromptu touching battles, he doesn't mind a single bit.